Hello AP World History students, Mr. Lassiter here, and in this video we're going to think about what it takes to build an empire, and we're going to be looking specifically at ancient Persia in the Middle East. So we want to think about a few video goals. First, what is an empire? This is something we haven't talked much about. What techniques did empires use to grow and control vast areas of land? And how did the Persian Empire employ these techniques? And then we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end talking about a new religion that springs up out of Persia, shifting gears a little bit to discuss Zoroastrianism. So what are the characteristics of an empire? Well, an empire begins when we see powerful cities, especially those of Mesopotamia, begin to conquer and impose their rule over other cities, mostly to take their resources and people. You can imagine that conquered peoples don't like this very much, so that can lead to some challenges for empires. But an empire tends to also rule over a diverse group of people. So you have people of different religious practices, perhaps worshiping different gods, different ethnic and cultural backgrounds, perhaps many different languages being spoken within this one state. And in general, the territory of empires are usually larger than that of kingdoms, which is why they can become so diverse. Generally, the larger and more diverse the empire, the harder it is to govern. And so empires in the ancient and classical period start to develop some techniques that make it easier to govern these large, diverse areas of land. And they get better and better at this, even still improving on it today. So let's look at some of these techniques. How can you become a successful empire? Well, the first thing you want to do is be efficient. So you need to organize a government. You'd like it to be centralized, so control to be under one person or perhaps a very few number of people. It would be helpful to centralize power by creating a bureaucracy. Now, this term refers to people or agencies that work directly for the people in charge. So instead of being perhaps lesser kings or nobles out far away from the capital city, these people owe their wealth and their loyalty directly to the ruler. And this allows the ruler to really keep an eye on what's going on in the government and hopefully to run more efficiently. Another thing that helps the government organize and become efficient is to develop legal systems throughout the empire to try to make laws a little bit more uniform, especially in a region that can be so diverse. Secondly, you want to be able to project your power. That way you can get the stuff you want. After all, you didn't conquer all this territory for nothing. You might need to create a large military or build fortifications or defensive walls or roads, perhaps, to help you get things or perhaps protect the things that you've taken. A couple of things other successful empires do is they use diplomacy, that is kind of this skill of dealing with foreign groups of people or perhaps people in the empire. And they also, many of these empires practice tolerance. Tolerance for local customs, local religious traditions. Because if you can convince people that you're okay with them practicing whatever religion they want as long as they pay you money, then you're more likely to keep rebellion from happening. The third thing you want to do is get rich. So one way to do that is promote trade. This could be done by building roads to encourage people to trade with others, or by doing something like issuing money, like printing the picture of your emperor on a coin perhaps, and then letting people use that coin to buy the things they need. The last thing that some successful empires do in this time period is they realize that in centralizing, they need a center for trade or public gatherings or religious rituals. And so they build capital cities for this purpose. This is a centralized place for the political administration and where important things that are going on in the empire can happen. Now, these are the tools of that empires, or the techniques that empires might use to be successful. So let's look at a specific empire and see how they used these tools. This picture shows the Achaemenid Empire. It is really what becomes, or what is also known as the Persian Empire. It's really the first of many different Persian empires that come along. And it lasted for about 200 years, from about 550 BCE to 330 BCE. And it's known as the Achaemenid Empire because of the Achaemenid dynasty who ruled it. But it was in modern-day Iran, Anatolia, Egypt, and it also goes by the name Persian Empire, so I'll be using that term as well. So first of all, Persia had to organize the government. Their government was ruled by an all-powerful king and emperor. First, it was a Median king, and he's overthrown by a guy named Cyrus the Great. In ruling this empire, Cyrus conquers a huge territory, and he realizes that it makes it a little difficult to control, right? As the king, you're only in one place, so how can you control an empire that's thousands of miles wide? Well, you need some regional governors who might be loyal to the king to help. And so the Persian Empire creates this position called a satrap. It's basically a regional governor who collected taxes that they sent back to the capital city. They made sure the laws were running smoothly, making sure people were trading fairly. And so they run the day-to-day operations in each of these provinces throughout the Persian Empire. Another thing that the Persian Empire does is that they create a single law code across their empire. And they don't just make a law code and then impose it on everyone else. They actually take some laws from every region they conquer in order to make a unified law code that everyone will accept. And to make sure it was applied consistently, they appointed royal judges to go throughout the empire to make sure that the courts ran smoothly. Of course, Persia did project its power. It had quite a strong military. It began expanding under a guy named Cyrus the Great. And then later, one of his grandsons or great-grandsons, I can't remember how far apart they were, a guy named Darius, he continues conquering the territory of basically everything from Turkey in the west to India in the east. And that included Egypt and Mesopotamia, and of course, the center of the empire in Persia, or what is now present-day Iran. But in projecting their power, their military power, they also had a policy of tolerance. So they respected local traditions and religions as long as people were obedient to them and paid their taxes. Remember, you go and conquer these territories not to necessarily force your way of life on them in an empire, but instead to get more stuff. So Persian royalty would even go to these local territories and perform rituals, perhaps even perform religious rituals and sacrifices to the local gods in those regions to keep the people happy. And this was important because at the time Darius is around, in the height of the Persian Empire, about 44% of the entire world's population lived in the Persian Empire. It is still to this day the world's largest empire if we think about it in terms of percentage of the world's population. No other empire comes close. About 4 in 10 people in the world lived here in 500 BCE. The third thing Persia did, of course, third and fourth things, were to promote trade and, as we said, build cities. And so they promoted trade by some economic reforms, and this is what Darius was most known for, other than unsuccessfully attacking Greece. So he implemented a system of common weights and measures. So a pound of wheat in Persia would be the same as a pound of wheat in Egypt. And that was really important for trade to happen smoothly. He also encouraged the use of coins. You see here a gold coin from the ancient Persian Empire. And he even built roads. And that allowed it allowed Persians to move from place to place and trade more easily. One of the most important of these roads is called the Royal Road, and you can see it on this map in red. It was an ancient highway connecting the capital city of Persia, known as Susa, all the way to the Mediterranean in the city of Sardis. Basically, it was 1,600 miles of road that connected some of the most important parts of the empire so that they could move goods back and forth. If you traveled quickly on horseback, you could make it in about 7 days. It was about 90 days walking. Another thing that the Persian Empire does, of course, is they build capital cities. Susa is their administrative capital. That's where their government resides. That's where all the tax money was sent, and it would be stored in large storehouses before that money might be sent back out to people who worked for the government to build projects. And then they also built a ceremonial capital at a place called Persepolis, and that is what you see here in this image. That was where they carried out the crowning of the king, and they carried out other religious ceremonies and ceremonies where people would bring tribute to the king, basically showing their obedience. Now, to rule over Persia, you still had to have a claim to legitimacy. And one way to gain legitimacy in ruling over other people is to just be good at being an empire. Do the things you're supposed to do, be tolerant of other people, and make sure that everybody makes money. But there was also the idea of social stratification, right? The king being at the top, along with the priests and the royal family. Then you have warriors, of course, the king being the most important warrior. Property owners, people who were quite wealthy, maybe aristocrats were in there. Then peasants and slaves. And with the king at the top of the social stratification being the most important, obviously, he is the one who is fit to rule. Another thing that the Persian king or emperor does is he claims legitimacy from sources including religion. And actually, some of the early Persian kings claim legitimacy from multiple religions. They might worship many different gods from different areas of Persia and from the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism. So basically trying to find legitimacy with any god that'll have them. So let's talk about this religion of Zoroastrianism that I just mentioned. This is an important feature of Persian culture and one that'll factor in to our study of religion in the ancient world. So this is a religion, again, it develops in Persia around 600 BCE. It's based on the teachings of a guy named Zarathustra or Zoroaster, who you see pictured on the left. He taught that all the old Persian gods were false, and he emphasized that people should live an ethical life and follow kind of a straight and narrow ethical path, because they will be judged in the end by a supreme wise God. This God was called Ahura Mazda, and the idea was this one God, this God of good, was battling against an evil, destructive spirit. Angramanyu was this kind of spirit's name, and you can get a sense that it's idea of kind of a monotheistic God and Satan figure in this religion. Certainly, Zoroastrianism had a major influence on Persia. It actually helps to unite all Persians in the empire. As this religion becomes more popular, it is adopted by the emperor himself. And then, of course, if the emperor converts to a religion, many other people are going to convert. And so it gives further legitimacy to the king. In fact, in this picture here from the Behistun inscription, it actually shows Darius conquering a group of people and the god Ahura Mazda up above him. And he says, "By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I am king." Zoroastrianism's legacy is most seen in its influence on other monotheistic religions, particularly Christianity and Islam. It features the idea of good versus evil in the world, with good ultimately winning out. It also says that at the end of the world there will be a judgment day, and people who lived good ethical lives will go to heaven, and people who do not will burn in the eternal fires of hell. Well, I'm not sure if their hell has eternal fire, but nevertheless, there was that concept of hell that is adopted by Christianity and Islam. And so, even though there are only a couple 100,000 Zoroastrians who practice in the world, mostly found in India today. Its influences are seen in the two largest religions in the world, that is Christianity and Islam. So that's our video taking a look at the techniques of empires, and specifically the Achaemenid or Persian Empire and how it used these techniques, and a little bit of background on Zoroastrianism. I hope this video was informative, and we'll see you in class.